We're picking right back up where we left off last week with our Fitness Fridays. So, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Trevor Brown with Life Based Solutions. I have been a 12-year gym owner. I own Kearney CrossFit right smack dab in the middle of the United States in Kearney, Nebraska. We do group training, personal training. We work with kids from ages 7 years old all the way up to people in their 70s and 80s. I have personally worked with and coached over 700 nutrition clients out of my business in the last 5 years or so. And I am the head of business development for Life Based Solutions. Life Based Solutions is a nutrition software company, and we help other businesses do essentially what we have done in our gym from a nutrition standpoint, giving people the tools to scale and manage a nutrition business that very humbly gets results that very few others can. So that's my role. That's why I'm here. I'm excited on Fridays to be bringing you all things fitness and nutrition. But what's really going to make this stuff fun is everybody in this group commenting, joining in, just asking questions. You can drop questions in the comments. I'm going to see them in here. I'll do as my best job as I can to keep up on all that stuff, write things down. So as many of you come in as you want and just ask questions. No matter how silly it seems, no matter how basic it seems, I can assure you that somebody else somewhere is thinking something along the same line. So don't be shy. Come in, join me this morning, ask questions, and I think we'll just keep it lighthearted. We'll keep it fun. We'll play things by ear a little bit and see where we go directionally with these things for a while. So I plan on being here every Friday with you. We're gonna pick up momentum. We're gonna build steam. Like I said, last week was an hour. I'm hoping for maybe 20 or 30 minutes for most of these, and just kind of seeing how you guys do, where the questions are. If the questions take us for an hour, I'll be here for an hour. That is totally cool. So I do have some topics we can go over, which I'll just kind of start talking. Then as people come in, feel free to ask questions. Like I said, you don't have to wait for me to finish. Just drop them in here and I'll get back to you guys. And of course, if you would like to ask me a one-off question or shoot me an email or something you just don't want to talk about publicly, you can always message me on Facebook. You can also follow Life Based Solutions on Instagram and just reach out to us if you want to send us a direct message. And then my email, trevor@lifebasedsolutions.com. You can always get a hold of me that way. I would love to send you some resources, some various things, whatever you guys are looking for. So in the meantime, let's get started. Let's have some fun. I'll cover a few things that are related to nutrition and fitness, the roles that macronutrients play in the body, and some of our basic nutrition rules, and then we'll kind of go from there. So I feel like as a qualifier, keep in mind that you guys, of course, anytime you're seeking like real nutrition advice, talk to your personal nutrition coach. That is not my role for now with you working one-on-one. That is a different role. This is just general guidelines, basic stuff, things that will apply to maybe 98% of people. But you always want to consult your doctor or health professional before starting any nutrition plan or anything along those lines. So just keep that in mind. I think most of this stuff will apply to almost all of you, but there's always going to be those nuances where things need tweaked or they don't quite apply across the board. So let's jump in. Some of the stuff's gonna be very elementary for some people. Some of it is gonna be like, oh, cool, I didn't know that. So just have fun with it. I hope that we'll give you guys all something or teach you something as we move through today. So let's just start with the roles that macronutrients play in the body, right? And we'll get to how they relate to fitness specifically here very shortly, but proteins, we'll start there, right? And we'll define a protein first. Protein is very simple. I was looking at anything that had a mother, right? So that's our meats, things that more often than not, okay, when we look at it that way, so people think is like chicken, beef, shrimp, pork, things that came from animals, if you will, right? Those are animal protein sources. Those are what we call complete proteins. Generally speaking, there are 20 amino acids that make up a complete protein, right? So you've got a complete protein source. Okay, so let's take like steak, for example. Okay, all 20 of those amino acids are present. Some of those are essentials, some of those are non-essentials, about a 50-50 split. And the difference between non-essential and essential, very simple. Non-essential amino acids means that your body produces them on their own. They can synthesize them on their own. You don't have to get them from outside sources. Essential amino acids very simply means that you can't produce these things on your own. And so you have to get them from food sources, right? So knowing that, we're always thinking about complete amino acid profiles or complete amino acid sources when it comes to proteins. So, and if people are plant-based or vegan, don't take this wrong. That's not the way I intend it. But vegetables are not complete protein sources. And we got this question last week with Trev, what do I do if I'm mostly a vegetarian or I'm very plant-based and I don't eat meat or I don't eat a lot of meat? How do I make sure that I'm getting all of my amino acids, right? Well, in those cases, you do have to eat a very wide variety of plants, beans, legumes, things along those lines to get that complete amino acid profile. And that's a lot of times why people tend to supplement with plant based diets and things to make sure that you're getting that full amino acid profile, right? So, if we were to break down proteins and we were to look at them like a building, how structurally, how do they impact the body, right? Because proteins are the building blocks for the body. Most people have heard of collagen. Collagen and stuff, it's very specific type of protein that is really in the body meant to be utilized like hair, nails, joints, things like that, right? Think about like things that are elastic in the body, those things are fibrous proteins. So that's why people associate, I'm going to take collagen, right? Because it'll make my hair grow, my nails grow, right? So collagen is part of a protein. Okay. It's one type of protein, if you will. And so there's the building blocks for the body as we go through this. So if it's a building, if my body is a building, proteins are the framework. Proteins are the bricks. It's the foundation. It's things that hold this up and keep it together, right? Well, then amino acids would be the parts of that framework. Okay, so we break them down like the nuts and the bolts, right? And so you can imagine if there's some nuts and bolts missing from a building, it's not going to be structurally as stable, right? So I've got 2x4 steel frame construction, whatever it is, man, those are my proteins. Cool. But now I got to make sure that within those proteins, I have all of my nuts and bolts or amino acids present in order to hold them together. So that's protein's role, right? That's why we need a complete amino acid profile. Boom, we got it. Carbohydrates. All right, what role do those things play in the body? We're going to keep this really simple and then dive into it more and talk about exercise. They're fuel for your body, right? You guys know, especially having diabetes, that carbohydrates are converted to blood sugar and then they get stored as glycogen, which is just kind of stored carbohydrates to oversimplify it in the muscle and liver. So carbohydrates are a fuel source for your body. We're going to leave it at that. Fats, what do they do? All kinds of incredible things, right? They can affect hormones, right? They affect cellular membranes. They affect transport and how things move throughout the body. So we got all kinds of cool things that fats do in the body. So fats are important. They're not bad, right? But I think they get a bad rap. Like you think fat, you tend to think like actual fat, right? Here's where you get into trouble with fats. With proteins and carbs, there's 4 calories per gram. With fats, there's 9 calories per gram. So they're very calorically dense, right? Which makes them really easy to overeat, right? And so from a nutrition standpoint, where we tend to go down a dark path or get into trouble is if we focus on foods that are high carbohydrate and high fat and very low protein. So, Trev, what are some examples of those foods? Well, very simply, that would be things like cake, cookies, ice cream, candy, butter, all those things where we're dealing with cream based things where it's all fat, all carbohydrates, and high sugar, and there's not really any protein present, right? So it can be tricky. Like you look at a granola bar or a Cliff Bar is one we get all the time. Hey, Cliff Bars are good. Athletes eat them. They're very, very high sugar. It's processed. It's a lot of carbs and some fat, and they're very low protein. So um, the roles they play are awesome in the body. You need all three of these things, right? Because they each play a unique role. So just imagine within the body, if you never have any protein in your diet whatsoever. If you leave protein out, now you have nothing to build your body, hold it together, make it structurally sound, right? No muscle, if you will. Okay. If we eliminate all carbohydrates from the diet, and we can debate this carnivore diet, typically speaking, that's a good energy source away from the body, right? And then if we eliminate fats, it's gonna be pretty hard to do. You're not getting a lot of things. You're gonna affect your hormone levels. You're gonna affect cellular transport, your cellular membranes. We're gonna do some damage to the body because there are good fatty acids and things, right? Um, but that would be very hard to eliminate all fats from your diet anyway. So typically the one that gets eliminated is carbohydrates. So I want to start there. I want to talk about how food and carbohydrates specifically can impact the body during exercise. So um, let's think of it like this. There's a phrase called "earn your carbs." This gets utilized a lot in the fitness world. And what does "earn your carbs" mean? Really, really, really simple. The more active you are, the more carbohydrates you're probably going to need, to keep it simple, right? So when they say "earn your carbs," like, hey, if you want to eat more food, then you just need to be more active. Okay. So we worked with a lot of clients that are younger, and I think back. I'm 39 years old now. I think back to when I was in my early 20s. For the most part, I could kind of eat whatever I wanted. I could have pizza, I could eat the ice cream. I didn't do that stuff a ton, right? But I could, and I get away with it. Um, Typically speaking, you're young, you've got hormone levels going, you haven't had a chance to wreck your metabolism, break your body down yet in a bad way nutritionally. So you're at your peak performance level, typically speaking, when we're younger, right? And so what happens is you're able to better control or better to metabolize and utilize, I'd say, poor nutrition if you're working out enough, right? So, man, if I want to spend 2 or 3 hours a day in the gym, I could, and I could probably eat pizza and get away with it when I was younger. Now, as I get older, and if I do that for 15 years, okay, at some point my body's going to catch up because food quality absolutely matters, right? So over time, very slowly over time, I begin to wreck my metabolism. I begin to not provide my body the nutrients and the quality nutrients that it needs. And now at the age of 39, if that's what I'm doing, a pizza is going to affect me a lot different than it did the age of 20, right? So we're talking on a podcast last week where diabetes doesn't just happen overnight, right? So type 2 diabetes takes a lot of years to develop. It's something that slowly builds, and we get to a point where, oh man, now I'm in the situation. So look at it like I can probably get away with more poor quality food choices when I'm younger. When I'm more active, the more that I work out, right? But we want food quality to be at the top of your list. So when I talk about earning your carbohydrates, yes, to some extent, especially when you're younger, right? The more you exercise, the more carbohydrates and food your body can process, metabolize, and handle. But as we age, it still applies where you want to earn your carbs. So when we talk to our nutrition clients, for the most part, the more active you are, we're going to give you more carbohydrates because it's a great fuel source. And we're going to center those carbohydrates all around your workouts, right? Before you work out and after you work out. And then we're going to kind of taper those off, at night, we're not as active, things along those lines. So why is it important around the workouts, right? Well, when we eat carbohydrates, and I'm oversimplifying some of these things. When I'm eating carbohydrates, they get converted to blood sugar, which you guys are very familiar with. And if I'm an active person, my body has that readily available fuel source to use right away. A good analogy that I like to use is this. You guys imagine a professional basketball player, okay? LeBron James, whether you like him or not, but he's standing on the sidelines of an NBA basketball game and he's drinking a Gatorade. Why Gatorade? Why not eating a steak? Why not chicken, right? That'd be healthier. Why not oatmeal? Why not eating something like that or quinoa or brown rice on the sidelines? Why does LeBron opt for a Gatorade or some other kind of sugar filled electrolyte drink, right? The answer is very simple, and you guys know this. Think about when you're low on blood sugar, right? We have glucose tabs or things like that, very simple sugars that get digested real quick because it's going to raise your blood sugar levels back. Athletes are the same way. When we're in the middle of intense bouts of exercise, right, and we're going hard, you don't want something that takes a long time to digest that slowly impacts your blood sugar. Okay. So if LeBron were to go to the sidelines and eat a cup of brown rice, great quality carbohydrate source, high fiber, low sugar, but he's going to go back out on the court and he's not really going to feel a lot different, right? And his stomach will be a little bit more full, but he's not going to feel different from an energy standpoint, from a fuel standpoint, because it just didn't raise his blood sugar enough to give him that boom, instant carbohydrate spike, that instant blood sugar spike for energy for his body to use, right? So if he drinks Gatorade or something that has some simple sugars in it, man, that spikes your blood sugar quick. Now he's out there being crazy active, moving, dunking basketballs, running at full speed, and he's got that fuel there for him. So during exercise, during intense bouts of exercise, especially, carbohydrates and simple ones at that can be utilized for fuel in a good way, right? And then post workout, your body's in a catabolic state. It's breaking down muscle. It needs to be repaired. You just put your body through the ringer. So then simple carbohydrates, this one, sugar would be a good quality source of carbohydrates immediately post workout, right? So good quality post workouts will have like creatine, sugar, protein in them. A lot of them now just have amino acids, essential amino acids, which is protein broken down. But those simple sugars post workout can help you recover, right? Spike your blood sugar, and then it's going to deliver nutrients to your muscle because helping them recover. So think in workouts or immediately post workout, sugar can actually be okay. But the key to that is actually being in intense workouts. If you're walking into the gym and you're just jumping on a treadmill and you're going to go for a walk and do some lightweight, maybe some band exercise like we talked about last week, some lightweight weightlifting, it's probably not something where you need to carry around a bottle full of sugar essentially and drink it. You'll end up consuming more calories than you burn, and you're really just not doing enough intense exercise to warrant that. So that's how carbohydrates are utilized for energy. They fuel your glycolytic metabolic pathway, right? Which I'm going to get into this stuff here in just a second. So, outside of workouts, we do want high quality carbohydrates. We do want those that are high in fiber and low in sugar. Those are your complex carbohydrates, right? Because they impact your blood sugar levels differently. A good analogy for this would be I remember back to science class when I was in seventh grade. And we took one day in class ice cubes and put water in them and stirred up that cup of ice, right? Well, our partner next to us took crushed ice, put it in a cup with water and stirred it up. And it was, hey, which one dissolved faster? And the answer was the crushed ice dissolved faster than the ice cubes themselves. Same amount of ice, right? As far as the actual amount, just broken down differently. And so, what is the difference? Well, there's more surface area. They break down, they dissolve quicker, right? And so that's why the crushed ice dissolves quicker. I want you to look at carbohydrates the same way. Complex carbohydrates would be like those ice cubes in water, right? They just take longer to break down and digest. Whereas the crushed ice would be like simple sugars. It'd be like those simple carbohydrates. They are crushed ice, and man, they just dissolve really, really quickly, right? So if you want to switch that up and look at it like fats, for example, fats are more calorically dense. They are more like those ice cubes, whereas protein and carbs would be more like the actual crushed ice in a cup. So when we consume proteins, carbs, and fats together, fats actually help slow down the digestion of food and help regulate blood sugar levels when eaten in the appropriate amounts with healthy fats in conjunction with proteins and carbs, because they're like those ice cubes and they just simply take longer to digest. So, little tangent there, kind of cool when you know how that stuff works, right? So, as we're going back to your metabolic pathways, there are three metabolic pathways in the body. Okay. The first one is your phosphogenic pathway or your creatine phosphate pathway. Okay. Creatine powers you for exercise. This is stuff that you do in very short bouts, very intense, right? And you've heard of creatine ATP, perhaps. Those of you that remember science class or took a biology class or things along those lines, you might have heard that term ATP, creatine ATP, adenosine triphosphate, three phosphates. And very simply, what happens is in the body, we do things that are super intense. Like I want you to think about Usain Bolt. He's in the Olympics, right? He's running the 100-meter dash in 9.56 seconds. Okay. I think that's close to the world record. So he's running at 9.5 seconds. Creatine phosphate is going to power him through that exercise. It's high intensity, max effort, high energy output for extremely short bursts of energy. Like walking into a weight room and doing a 3-rep max bench press. Those you like to weight lift, right? You can imagine if I load up a barbell with 245 pounds and I bench press that 3 times, and if that is my absolute max, like I would have failed on rep number 4. I re-rack it. I physically could not turn around 1 minute later and do it again, right? Muscle fatigue has set in. My body has burned through its creatine stores. I just can't. So here's what happens. Where do you get that energy from? So that triphosphate, 3 phosphates, right? Boom, 1 breaks off. I'm left with 2 phosphates. Now ADP, adenosine diphosphate, okay? And then you have AMP, okay, monophosphate. But we break off 2. The actual chemical reaction from the breaking of a phosphate is what powers your body for those short bursts of energy, Okay. So, man, I want to do something crazy intense. I want to do my high jump, long jump, triple jump, throw a discus and track, whatever it is. That's creatine that powers you, right? Let's forget that. And then your body starts to replenish that. So, creatine, very well searched research subject, but so you guys know it's found in meats. Creatine monohydrate, typically speaking, very simple, pretty cheap, and that's how it's utilized in the body. So, if you want to know, go do your research on creatine and how it's actually affected when it comes to exercise and things. Okay, so now let's get into our glycolytic pathway. So that's your creatine phosphate or phosphogenic pathway. Let's get into the glycolytic pathway and how carbohydrates affect that. So in the glycolytic pathway, that's carbs. So your body, boom, breaks down carbohydrates. We'd already talked about the simple and complex. So I've got some blood sugar, right? Ready to go. Converts that stuff to glucose. All right, man, I've got energy. Boom, that's gonna fuel my body. Okay. So your body, through the Krebs cycle and other things, utilize carbohydrates for energy. Cool, we know that. What happens when I don't work out? What happens? Well, if I eat carbohydrates, they get converted to glucose, okay? And then I don't work out, I'm not burning them off, I'm not utilizing them. I got to put them somewhere, okay? So they get stored in the muscle, okay, in the form of glycogen. 70% is stored in the muscle and the rest in the liver. So it can function appropriately, right? So when it comes to exercise, we know the role that creatine plays. We know that creatine phosphate pathway. Now we're talking about carbohydrates. Now that affects your exercise, right? So when I'm utilizing exercise in that 2 to 10 minute window, man, I'm going out, I'm doing things pretty intense. Carbs are great because it's that glycolytic pathway that is fueled by those. But if we're not exercising, now they get stored as glycogen. Here's the issue, and this is where we get into trouble, especially in America, where 70% of people are overweight or obese, right? Is your muscles can only hold so much glycogen. I want you to look at them like a sponge holding water, right? If I were to take a sponge and hold it underneath a faucet, I can sit here and I can pour water over this sponge all I want, right? When it is full, when it is saturated, it will not hold any more water. I can hold that sponge under the faucet for as long as I want, and the excess water will drip over into the sink. Your muscles are the same way, right? They can only store so much glycogen. So if we continue to eat carbohydrates and we don't exercise and we continue to eat simple sugars and processed foods and we're not burning them off in that glycolytic pathway, which is that 2 to 10 minute window roughly, right? Then what happens is now they get turned to fat. So that overabundance of carbohydrates, right? Now our muscles are full, we can't store anymore, and boom, they get stored as fat, right? So, and I'm oversimplifying that, but that's essentially why we tend to get in trouble in America because we have so much snack and junk food that is very carbohydrate and fat focused that our muscles, because most Americans don't exercise enough either, right? They get stored as fat because our muscles are full of glycogen. This is why when you're young, right, you can afford to eat. Now we're coming full circle with this concept. You can afford to eat poorer food choices and a higher abundance of processed carbohydrates and things because if you're crazy active, you're going to burn off a lot of those carbs and they won't get stored as glycogen and they won't lead to an overabundance of carbohydrates and glycogen and the body just gets stored as fat, right? So that's what we mean by earn our carbs, bring all that stuff together. So what's that third metabolic pathway? What does that look like when it's exercise? That's your aerobic pathway. That's your oxidative pathway, right? So now this is where you might be going out and going for a walk. You're going out for a jog, okay? Going out and I'm doing this stuff. Well, that is oxygen that you're utilizing when you respirate. We use that. That's your aerobic pathway. That is what we burn for fuel. So in your creatine phosphate pathway, it's creatine that's used, right? Creatine ATP. And then we get to our glycolytic pathway, it's carbohydrates that are used. And then we get to the aerobic pathway, your oxidative pathway, it's oxygen that you respirating and breathing that fuels you. So in that oxidative pathway, 30% of the energy expenditure there is from carbohydrates. 70% of that energy expenditure is from fat. So very different, right? So this is why when we talk about burning fat, okay, we talk about getting into that aerobic pathway, that monostructural pathway where I'm going to do stuff for 30 or 40 minutes at a time. And I'm going to use fat for my fuel source. I'm getting past that glycolytic window, right? So just think if you can imagine a bodybuilder, like, yes, like those guys that are big, take a lot of steroids, okay, when I'm getting on stage, I'm going to flex for everybody, show how ripped I am, okay? So what they do when they're cutting for a contest, right, their goal is to very simply burn extra calories, burn fat without sacrificing muscle, right? Well, if they were to do high intensity interval training and train for 10-minute windows, 5-minute windows, do things like CrossFit, a HIIT class, boot camp, that interval high intensity stuff, they would be breaking down muscle, utilizing glycogen stores in the muscle, right? And it would defeat the purpose of getting on stage and trying to look as big as humanly possible, right? With having as little body fat as possible. So, those people, what they do instead is as they're prepping for a contest to get on stage, they will do steady state cardio, a stair climber, a stair stepper, an elliptical, a treadmill, and walk stuff for 30 or 40 minutes at a time. And they'll get longer in duration the closer they get if they need to burn more fat. Because what it does is 70% of your fuel is coming from fat, while only 30% is coming from carbs. If they were to do that high intensity exercise, the majority of their fuel would come from carbohydrates, which a lot is stored in the muscle, right? And they'd be sacrificing muscle and glycogen stores. You guys have a little insight as to how different types of exercise can impact muscle, can impact body fat and burning and things along those lines. So, generally speaking, if you want to do the best combination of both, if you want to burn fat, you want to build muscle, right? You're going to do that high intensity interval training done somewhere in that 2 to 10-minute window. If you can imagine a track team, right? We're watching the Olympics every 4 years. United States going out there competing, and what you've got is you've got Team USA, Germany, Japan, England. Everybody's out together, and we're running the 2-mile. Okay, imagine what a 2-mile runner or a marathon runner looks like. Okay, now I want you to imagine what a 400-meter sprinter is built like. Okay, very different body types. That 400-meter sprinter has a ton of muscle, big legs, man, just muscles everywhere because they do that high intensity interval training, stuff that's done 30 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minutes, 4 minutes at a time. Whereas your marathon runner is always training in that aerobic or oxidative pathway, right? So they tend to be smaller in nature. They tend to not have as much muscle, very, very lean, right? So if we're going to where I want to maximize how much muscle I can put on or keep while burning body fat, because those 400-meter sprinters have just as little or even less body fat than a marathon runner does, right? They're crazy lean, six-pack abs. You're going to high intensity exercise and do it in interval training. That's how you will maximize burning body fat while building muscle. It's interval training, right? Now you start to add in weights with it or resistance training done in intervals or done at high intensity. And now you're really building muscle and burning body fat at the same time. And now you guys can see how that stuff works, right? Keep in mind, we talked about it last week. Intensity looks different for everybody. So intensity looks different for me than it does for my mom, than it does for my grandparents, than it does for a college athlete. So while I'm saying interval training, I could do interval training with my mother who is 74 years old, right? I might be using weight. She might be using body weight. I might be doing sprints. She might be pedaling on a recumbent bike, very easy, but we will go at a intensity level relative to our current state of fitness, and we'll go as hard as we can to what that allows us to do to we're out of breath, we're breathing hard, we're uncomfortable a little bit, but her body weight is going to build muscle, right? That's her resistance training. Whereas I need to add external load. I'm going to go out and sprint, where she's going to be on a recumbent bike pedaling as quick as she can, right? And that is going to be the same stimulus, the same feel for exercise, just done very differently for the two of us, right? So let's bring that all together. I'm not getting a lot of comments in here, so feel free to reach out to me. We're going to keep doing this, guys. I'll be here every Friday. If you want topics brought up, just shoot me a message, shoot me an email, trevor@lifebasedsolutions.com. Let me know something you guys want me to talk about. If it's something I don't know the answer to, I'm going to go out and I'm going to do research. I'm going to ask our team. I'm going to get the answers for you. But I think most things I'll be able to answer very intelligently for you and at least point you in the right direction, right? We've got a great abundance of resources I can throw your way from a nutrition and fitness standpoint. So let's bring this full circle, right? Proteins, carbs, and fats, they each play a unique role in the body. Proteins are the building blocks for the body, right? Get broken down into amino acids, which are like the nuts and bolts that hold everything together. Then you have carbohydrates. They fuel your body, right? We talk about earning your carbs. The more active you are, right? Especially in that high intensity window, 2 to 10 minutes at a time, the more carbohydrates you're going to need. And then you've got your fats, which are good for hormone, cellular transport, cellular membranes, all those cool things. So I appreciate you guys being here today. hit me up with emails, questions, comment on this. I'll try to get back to them later. I appreciate each one of you. Have an awesome weekend. We'll be back next week with more, guys. Okay, see you soon.